Hello, welcome to our open house Q&A. Let's see as many questions we can answer in the next 1 hour. And the goal is to create these as more like a reference point for you to be able to do a knowledge check. One of the things I always advise, especially when we do a long question and answer session, is that when you revisit it and you're watching, the first thing you want to do is when a question is being asked, pause and answer it. Then you can play and then see if you actually on this was in line. So put your question on the chat box, and I'm going to go ahead and answer that in order in which they come in. Now, the first question we have on the chat box is, how would you describe a retrospective that went bad? I'll use a one sentence to describe that. A retrospective that went bad don't have action item or do not have productive action item, right? So because action item is an output of a retrospective that show that we have identified where the problem is and then we are improving. So if a retrospective went bad, we're like, okay, we're fine, everybody's okay. And then goodbye, we'll see you next time, right? So that's a retrospective that went bad. All right, so the next question say, kindly clarify in practice how adding retrospective improvement action item in backlog empowering to the team is empowering to the team. How does that work in your environment? Now, let's assume that one of the retrospective action item was to improve transparency through clear communication, right? And then we agree that if any developer is implementing a change that will affect not just his environment or any other environment, they need to clearly communicate that in the team channel prior to implementing the change. Now you can add that as a story, right? You add that as a story. The difference is that you're not going to put a story point there. When you are putting up your spring retrospective, you assign it to you or to the person who would monitor that action item. So every time you're doing your daily stand-up, it's there on the board. It's visible for everybody. So we can all keep focused there. Or if you don't want to add it on your board, you can have a conference page where you have it there. But then as a Scrum Master or the team lead, every time you're starting a meeting, you probably want to put it as an action item where you remind people what are the key focus we want to improve on this week before you go ahead and launch your call or you go ahead and close your call. You want to make sure that you're bringing that to the attention of the people. But one of the best ways, especially with critical action item, is add them on your board, but don't assign a story point there, right? So that it doesn't affect your capacity. So the next question says, what kind of challenges do you face during PI planning? All right, so PI planning, it's multiple teams getting alignment and coming to a space where we can all share on the PI vision, looking at way to collaborate to facilitate dependency. Now, one of the biggest challenge in PI planning is not being able to get hold of other team in the time that you really need them. For instance, if I'm about to, let's say, if I'm about to resolve an impediment with Team D, and I go to Team D and they're having a really focused discussion, they will not let me in. Right. They'll say, okay, can you come back later on after an hour or so? Because they don't want you to disrupt. Remember, as a Scrum Master, one of the things you do is shield your team from external influence. Now, my team really need that result at that point, but then let's say the team B could not give me an immediate attention. So that is now a big challenge that those are some of the common challenges you face during the PI planning. All right. So, another challenge which you might also face, or another challenge, let me answer this like in an interview question. If I were to answer this in an interview question, the first thing I will say is that one of the major challenges I've faced during my PI planning is the fact that most often other teams might not be immediately available to respond to dependency collaboration. And this is a challenge because we need to hold on until when we can talk to someone before progress. And this can hold our work back. But then with effective facilitation and looking at how to reprioritize the work, there's a walkabout around that, right? So the next question says, how do you manage risks? Uh, okay, I'll give you a typical example. I work in a safe environment, and most often we resolve risks during the PI planning by by roaming the risks. ROAM is an acronym that stands for every risk that comes up. We want to ensure that we are resolving the risks, or we are owning the risks, or we are accepting the risks, or we are mitigating the risks. In this case, we know that it's an action item. In general, when a risk come up, what I do as a team leader and a Scrum Master, I ensure that an action is taken in order to look at what is the next step. What are the next step of action? Are we escalating that risk? Is this something the team can do? I want to put note on it and make sure that I'm resolving it right away. Next question, have you helped your team become agile? Now, this is a question that you want to say that you've worked in an environment that wasn't agile or that was still transitioning, and then you actually help them. So if I were to say, yes, as a team lead, even when I meet a team that might already be practicing, one of my question, which I always ask, is how can this team become more agile? Agile is more of a continuous learning and improvement process. And although we might already be using the framework, there are many opportunities we need to improve. So what I do is I foster collaboration and communication in a space where my team can leverage this tool to continuously can leverage this tool in their event and to continuously deliver value incrementally to the client. Next question, what are some drawbacks using Scrum? For me, I would say that I've not really encountered major drawbacks using Scrum, assuming that before we go to the implementation of Scrum, we need to first of all do our pre-evaluation to see that the work that we want to deliver is possible for us to deliver it incrementally. Now, Scrum is definitely not just a center around event implementation and the processes. It's more of an approach of delivering work. It's a flexible approach focused on customer-centric and giving us the ability to deliver bit by bit. So with that focus on delivering business value bit by bit, I always coordinate with my team to make sure that our focus is on delivering business value and not only on matrices and events. So from that perspective, I would say that I have not seen any drawback implementing Scrum. We might have drawback when maybe we're implementing in the wrong environment. For instance, let's say a project is a tight deadline and the customer is not willing to accept incremental delivery, right? We definitely will not be able to deliver that project with Scrum. So all of this evaluation need to take place before we implement. What's the need of knowing the concept of CI/CD as a Scrum Master? Now, CI/CD simply help us to build in a flow. It helps us keep flow. Continuous integration and continuous deployment. We are delivering incrementally. If we cannot integrate and deploy and continue, we cannot continuously integrate the pieces or the increment that we're building and continuously deploy that, then we have a breakage in the system, right? Where we can deliver one part, then the client has to wait several months to receive the other part. So by us implementing CI/CD, we're ensuring that the customer continuously draws value from our system and there are no interruptions within the process. What are the characteristics of a great Scrum Master? Be a good communicator, a good facilitator, a good coach, and a good teacher. If you put all of these characteristics together, you will be a good Scrum Master. What is user story mapping? Now, user story mapping help us to prioritize the work that we're going to be delivering, help us to prioritize. In user story mapping, what we are doing is that we're simply decomposing the features into story, and we are sequentially looking at what is the process in which we can deliver this, what is dependent on what, and being able to map out this story. It helps us to know which iteration or which sprint we need to implement the story. And that also helps us to be able to plan our capacity accordingly to see what time we might be needing more capacity, what time we might be needing less capacity. So story mapping simply is a technique that helps us to sequentially arrange our work, prioritize, and at the same time help us in resources allocation. Next question, what are your coaching technique? What are your coaching techniques? Now, as a coach, I leverage powerful questionings. I know there are many coaching techniques out there, like the grow technique and also the what's the other one called? The vocal approach. But then the key concern or the key question which I focus on, which has helped me a lot in my coaching, is that if there is a need, whether it be a conflict, whether it be me taking an action, I build questions around that action. And by asking the people involved, I can be able to engage everyone and not just assume that I know the answer, but being able to draw the right answer from the right participant. So powerful coaching technique, it's kind of very simple that can help almost everyone focus to draw exactly what we have. Now, it's also a very powerful coaching technique, given the fact that coaching is about directing. It's not about you. It's about the team you're working on, you're working with. So when you're working with a team, what happened? You continuously ensure that you're asking them the right questions and guiding them towards a solution. And the best way to do that is to leverage powerful questioning. How can Discord be dealt with within the Scrum team? Now, Discord for me simply means that we have difference in ideology. We're not seeing in one direction. I'll give you an example. I can be standing on one side, you're standing on the other side, and you say, "Oh, this is 6," but from the other side, I see that as a 9. Right, both of us are right based on where we're standing. So when it comes to Discord, one of the things we are focused on is to get the perspective of the different people and meet them where they are, look at the angle from which they're understanding, and then based on the data that I collect from both parties, I try as much as possible to align them towards the same vision. I will use the example of a 6 and a 9. Right. If the goal of the 6 and the 9 was to help us, let's say, add up number to 15. Now, it doesn't matter if you're seeing a 6 or if you're seeing a 9. The goal is, does it add up to 15? So by so doing, we're focusing on what? The result. But if we focus on maybe just the item, we can argue for the next day. And now conflict is also something which sometimes we cannot completely avoid, most especially in a Scrum environment for a couple of reasons. Number one, we're working with different people with different value, right? The different value, different belief, different understanding. And given that conflict is just difference in ideology, difference in thinking, we have most of these issues coming up. Next question says that, when would you prefer Waterfall or Kanban over Scrum, and why? Now, for me, I cannot compare Waterfall and Kanban and over Scrum, right? So I can compare two things. I can compare either Waterfall and Kanban, or I can compare Waterfall and Scrum, or I can compare Kanban and Scrum, right? So Waterfall and Kanban, they're not synonyms. Now, waterfall, I prefer waterfall concept when we're not flexible, the client is not open to deliver, to accept part of the of the product. They want everything delivered at once. Then that's a waterfall. The client is more concerned about the scope and the cost. And we time limited, we cannot make no mistake. I will consider waterfall. But then when it comes to either Kanban or Scrum, we are looking at the flexibility of delivery, right? But then most especially paying a difference between Kanban and Scrum. Kanban is when we are more focused on visualizing work in progress, right? Our attention is not so much on fast-paced learning, right? It's more on visualizing the project and making sure our manage work. Then Kanban is the most preferable. But if we, apart from visualizing the project and also managing work in progress, if we want to implement faster learning cycle, then I'm going to advise we go with Scrum. Next question says that how do you go about removing obstacles from the Agile team? Coach them. Well, the obstacle simply means that we have issues that are hindering us from moving ahead. Simply with powerful questioning. Why are we stuck? Why can't we get this out tomorrow? The team have the answer. You're not the one giving them the answer. So your goal as a coach is to be able to do the right inquiry, the right probing in order to direct the team to take action. How have you helped your team become high performing? By implementing effective communication and collaboration. This is a key. Now, what does it mean by effective communication and collaboration? Right. This is very important because until we all can understand that we are different, it's very difficult for us to collaborate. So when we communicate, it helps us to understand the standpoint from which we are all coming from. And with time, we can normalize and then do what? Align our expectation. But then if we don't communicate, we cannot understand each other and it becomes very difficult to build performance. That is why whenever we meet as new people in a team, we expect chaos. Why? Because we don't yet understand each other. As time goes on and we facilitate communication and collaboration, we start understanding each other. We can easily predict each other. What happened? We become normalized. As communication continue to improve in the team become performance. Now, this doesn't just happen on its own, right? You need to be a good facilitator, helping people understand that we are all different. Let's respect each other. Let's respect communication, respect of time, and all of that build into becoming a high-performing team. Why we a non be able to get that they want? Okay, this question is out of. Please, can you stay in context with what we are asking now? With all due respect, JM. How is estimation done in a project? This might be important, but I think not in this context now, right? We are all agile now. Let's wait for our leadership class to handle such questions. How is estimation done in a Scrum project? Story pointing, hours. You pick one of them. You either estimate in story point or you estimate in hours. Right. So I think if you want to be very specific with that question, you might react that to how do you estimate in story point or how do you estimate in hours? If that's what you're looking for, then you can react to the question and I'm going to answer it back again. How would you add value to an agile team that's already matured? Now, when a team is matured, we cannot say that they don't need value, right? Value is in your ability to be there for your team, right? When a team is matured, You being the facilitator, you continuously add value by being there for the team, right? By being there for the team. Just be there for them. There's nothing much you can do, right? I'm assuming that most of us here already know how to answer most of these questions, right? How do we add value to you? By constantly showing up. When you show up, you constantly remind them of what they're supposed to do and hold them accountable, right? So at that point, you continuously mentor the team. And just the fact that now let's give it very simple scenario you can use during your interview. I want to assume that let's say you go on retirement, right? You already mature, you know your way around. You don't need help in doing any stuff. But assuming that no one no one ever come around you for you to have a conversation with them, right? What happened? You definitely feel really left alone. So it doesn't matter how mature people are, they always need people there to support them. Sometimes it might not even be in facilitation, but it might just be you being there. So they have someone to talk to, have someone to check to, have someone to share a problem with. It might not even be for Scrum. One of the stuff I've seen with my teams that really have make a difference is not even me pushing in facilitation. Most often, I empower my team to even lead the facilitation. It's about me being really close to them. Hey, what plans do you have for weekends? Oh, there's a whole lot. Okay, now these are a couple of tricks you can do. Now this is what I've done in this session and other stuff, right? It's a whole lot. Being coaching and being invested and seeing your other team members as human who have need is one of the biggest value you can bring to your team. What's the relationship between software development cycle and Scrum? Um, in Scrum, we implement software, right? So you must understand the software development cycle to implement Scrum. What is software development cycle? If I give you a software to build, what happens? You need to be able to plan. You need to be able to do what? Develop and test and do what? Deploy. That's all what we do in Scrum. So Scrum, it's largely used in implementing software and it aligns with the software development lifecycle. How do you approach Agile in an environment where they insist they are not doing any development work? Agile is not for development work only. Agile is a flexible way of planning. For instance, I've worked with teams, what they do, they ship computers, right? So Agile simply help us to be able to do our intake process. How many orders do we have this week, right? And then plan, how do we plan to deliver them? And then follow up on those who are delivering on a daily basis, get feedback from the delivery process, and then we are able to do what? Improve on the process. So Agile is not only for development work, it can be used even in operational environment. How do you ensure the Scrum framework is being followed appropriately? I would say that the goal of Agile is not for the Scrum framework to be followed appropriately. It's to deliver value. If we're delivering value, we look at more of an evaluation of the effectiveness of a team, not an evaluation of how the Scrum framework is followed appropriately. I'll give you a couple of examples. Now, there might be a need for us to implement, let's say, Scrum Ban. Now, Scrum Ban is a combination of Kanban and Scrum, which means that because of the nature of our team, we can unanimously agree that we're not going to do daily stand-up every day. We can do daily stand-up twice a week, right? Now, that's not a pure Scrum framework approach, but we are borrowing some Kanban practices in order to help our team focus on the work they're doing. So our goal is never to implement Scrum by the book, but to leverage the practices to enable effective delivery of work. Name 3 examples of technical debt and how they were handled. technical debt, I would say I definitely cannot separate them into example one, example two, example three, but I could give you a couple of scenarios I've come across in terms of technical debt. For instance, we're about to deliver an MVP to our client, and they wanted it faster than the effort we needed to deliver, right? And this was we're building some room functionality software for a third party. So in this case, we needed to drop down some of the functionality that were not priority to us getting the work to them. Right. And then after they evaluated what we delivered to them, they're like, oh, ABC is missing. Now we're aware that it's missing, just that we just needed to give them something that close to what they want. And when it come back, we definitely need to put in time to do that. That's an example of a technical debt, right? But most often, what I really focus on with my team, it's more or less how do we minimize this technical debt and how do we make sure that happens. So I've hardly had technical debt in the team. A couple of one or two times we might have some bug fixing, which is really normal because of shift in environment, because of code refactoring and all of that, they might happen. But with technical debt, we try as much as possible to make sure that we handle that. What do you do in a situation where the tech lead is constantly in is const is a constant impediment to the team progress instead of being support? What dimension of impediment? How will you consider that an impediment? Is it that they are over talking? Is it that so Debo, if you can add more context to this story, why are they an impediment? There should be a reason why they're an impediment, and then we can now revisit that. What is change control in your environment, and how have you achieved change control in your environment? All right, now in my environment, change control happens at the enterprise level. It simply means that if we want to change the way some of the standard events are done, they need to go through the appropriate process. And in my environment, we use the Agile Center of Excellence, right? So any standard, any change that it's a standard that need to change. For instance, we want to be able to change our definition of done across the different teams. They need to go through a change control process. So with the change control process, the first thing we do in my environment is that it goes through a committee of about 7 people. They review that. If they validate that, then they send it through the Agile Center of Excellence. They validate that, and then they send it to the change committee, which include both management and then Agile Practitioner. Then we can adopt it now into the organizational process. Can you give me an example of situation where you have resolved misunderstanding between the team and the product owner? All right, I have not been in a situation where I have to resolve misunderstanding between a team and a product owner. This definitely might be because I understand that collaboration between team and and a product owner is paramount, and I need to enforce that. So most often when I join a team, one of the things I ensure that I do more of stakeholder questioning, where I can be able to understand areas where there are strife, area where there are no alignment. And most often, with just me revisiting working agreement and helping everybody understand their roles and clarity, it kind of really helped a lot to resolve conflict. But I've not really had to be in the point where I'm resolving conflict between team and product owner. Now, there have been a situation where my team was a bit unhappy in the way that work was being pushed to the team, right? But then I had to help them understand that this is not the fault of the product owner. But at the same time, I had a meeting with the product owner to see how this could be resolved, which was more of the intake process. So we're working on that while assuring the team. Okay, this is a very sensitive question, which you don't want to start using some specific example and then trying to push through to show that you are the big person that resolve impediment between product owner and the team. It's very risky for you to do that. So I would definitely not put a specific example. Identify and walk us through 1, 2 agile projects you have worked on and what was the outcome. All right, so one of the projects I've worked on within the banking sector was the how's it called again? Um, anti-laundry monitoring process, which was an automated system that was built in order to help clients and minimize the risks of anti-laundry. And it helped clients kind of implement multi-factor authentication when sending money, and most often require about 2 or 3 validation before the money can leave the receiver bank to the next bank. And the bigger goal was just to help reduce risks, right? Now, I've also been part of a project where we're building a centralized system that help brokers working in the health insurance company to effectively deliver licenses or no, not licenses, to be able to deliver insurance licenses to their customer. And we also build upgraded the functionality that help all of brokers to be able to receive their bonuses. Normally they used to receive it monthly, but then they wanted a system where they could be able to receive this early enough on time. So we had to build a system that aggregate all the data, recalculate bonuses weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, so that when a broker is signing up into the system, they can be able to pick out what is the cadence which they want to receive their bonuses, giving them flexible options, right? Now, another project which we also work with was the middleware project in a bank, which simply what we're doing is ensuring that all external applications that were sent into the company met minimum compliance before we are able to redistribute it or to send it to any other department that were engaged. Another project, we can go on and on again, right? Simply pick one or two of your case study and talk about that. How do you handle a sudden change in team composition or project resources? All right, the first thing I would do is link up with my product owner and any stakeholder that might be involved to have a conversation on how this is going to affect the overall scope and how we can readjust to this capacity. That's the first point of entry. And when I handle this and understand that this might affect our delivery date, or this might affect the flow of work, given that maybe a major capacity is missing, I do much to escalate that, or if something that we can accommodate, we simply just um, bring down the intake of our work, right? We simply just drop down our capacity. But if it's something that really need to be resolved, we escalate it to the right department and make sure that it is handled. What are the various type of tech debt you have dealt with? I think we've handled that question. Describe a time when you had to learn a new tool or methodology quickly to keep a project on track. All right, so this is a good question. Now, I will give a very clear example where my PO had to go on a vacation and they needed me to create a couple of initiatives and assign them to a different theme. Now, this was something, a software I wasn't kind of really open to at that particular point, and I've not been part of the process, but I had to link up with our tech lead and also with my manager to walk me through what are the criteria in considering different initiative and what are the intake process, being able to complete all of those forms and ensure that there is no gap that is missing. Right. Uh, another technique I had to learn very quickly in order to help my team was learning how to evaluate projects that meet the definition of done and to make sure I validate them. And my product owner also had to go on a 1 month leave. So he had to take me through that process of how do you validate and how do you ensure that you check to make sure that all acceptance criteria were completed. Next question says, as a Scrum Master for a newly formed team, the team does not have a product owner. My question is, who's responsible for the backlog? The Scrum Master is responsible for the backlogs, right? Now, you might also be in a process where maybe you can collaborate with the tech lead. In this situation, what happened is that you need to understand the intake process. How does the work come to the team? Who brings in the work? Now, in this case, most of the work that come in, we've already will be already written in the form that you can easily just input them on the backlog, and the team member go in and input all the details. So you will not be crafting anything from scratch. I've also seen a situation where the team members are the ones that are creating their, excuse me, the team members are the ones that are creating their stories. And you just need to make sure you facilitate to validate that it has the right acceptance criteria and also that it has the right description and all of that. Now, the next question says that, what are some limitations of Agile? I think limitation of Agile simply means that if you don't follow the values and Agile principle, you cannot use Agile. So anything out of the Agile value and principle, if it's not customer centric, we cannot draw the value of Agile, right? If we're working on a very tight budget, we are not willing to accept incremental delivery, we cannot use Agile. In a large organization, how would you approach scaling agile practices? What framework would you consider? What challenges might you anticipate and how would you address? All right, in a large organization, it's definitely not the job of a Scrum Master to scale agile. But let's assume that you're in a position to scale agile. The first thing you want to do is interview the business owner in order to understand what are the expectations, both short-term and long-term. Understand what are the scope of the project that they want to implement. Understand what type of collaboration and alignment. Understand the delivery of the whole product. Understand the different budget line and the different budget line and how they align to a strategy. So you can implement the portfolio Kanban to be able to collect all of these requirements. And then you can also do how do we call them? Objective verifiable indicators, right? Write all the major objective and how do they link to result? These are the results we want to attain by objective. Now, when you use objective verifiable indicator, it's easier now for you now to use key performance indicator to assess it. How are we going to know that this has been met? So it's a whole lot of complication. And then you start by training the leaders. And when you train the leaders, you can now start training the implementation team. When you start training the implementation team, you go now to team formation. When you go to team formation, now you start looking at, okay, you start looking at the different pipeline that are going to be used and mapping the engineering process from end to end, then aligning people around it. So it's a whole complex scenario which engage the entire team. But the short response to that is do a questionnaire to stakeholder, understand their short and long-term goal. And based on that, we can be able to advise what is the best approach for them to implement. And most often you start by, if you want to do maybe scale agile, you start by implementing one solution train or one agile release train or whatsoever approach you might be using before moving to the other one. Have you ever had a PO? Have you had to persuade the PO to prioritize a user story differently? How did you approach that? Oh yeah, so this is something I've done in most of the cases, and I would not say more or less persuading the PO, but more or less helping the team understanding the intake process and how the intake process should affect prioritization of the work. So in one of the company I work with, all of these were missing, and they were missing because the PO have not gone through formal agile training and did not really understand what are the criteria for prioritization. So because of this, I had to do some teaching and some knowledge sharing on what are the different methods we use in prioritizing, um, how do we estimate the work, right? Um, for instance, using I taught them how to use Moscow to prioritize, and also taught them how to use business value and communication with the stakeholders to understand and prioritize the different work. Now, if you want to talk about this in a safe environment, now you talk a bit about WestJet, right? But WestJet is at the program level. When it comes to the team level, you prioritize based on the business value. So the common key point here is you leverage the business value approach to be able to prioritize the work. How would you handle a situation where you have a dependency and the other Scrum Master doesn't collaborate? Now, after three attempt to collaborate and they don't collaborate, you escalate, right? You cannot force have access to the board. You escalate to the right opposite. It one collaboration, two collaboration, three collaboration. But if you want to answer this question, the first case is do a disclaimer, all right? Do a disclaimer before you answer that. How would you define your leadership style? I have a persuasive leadership style. Which means that I help my team members to see the reason why they need to do something before they do it. I don't force it on them. So I help them see value in what they are doing. With technical questions in interview, how do you respond to recruiters and hiring manager if I'm not familiar with the terms? What do you mean that you're not familiar with the terms? What would that entail? If you can re-ask that again. All right. Or do you mean that if they ask something you don't know, if they ask something you don't know, you don't know? You can ask them to rephrase to buy more time. But if you don't know, you don't know. Right. But if, for instance, I'll use a scenario. I can say, can you explain to me, or do you understand how throughput is used as a measure of evaluating team output? Now, let's assume that I have never heard the word throughput, but then I understand evaluating team measure output. So what I would say is, okay, I'm definitely not familiar with throughput because I've not used that metrics before, but I've used velocity chart and bend down chart to be able to evaluate my team output. Realize I did not leave that question unattended. I simply rerouted it and then focus on the major point that was being asked. Give an example of a complex impediment that impacted a team ability to deliver. How did you identify, escalate, and resolve it to minimize disruption? All right, I would definitely not say there's a complex impediment. An impediment is an impediment, whether it be small. So if we want to say complex, it simply means that it involves a whole chain of people, but there's always one person to reach out to, right? And if that person cannot resolve it, you move to the next person. I'll give you an example. My team needed an environment to be able to, they needed an environment, they needed the DevOps team to deploy an environment for them to be able to do some certain testing. And then the DevOps team, which was a shared services, was overpacked. Right. That become a complex challenge because the team have to be on hold for about a month before getting to the work. Right. So what happened? I simply escalated to my manager and then put an implication on how this is gonna affect our work. And then our manager also escalated it to higher manager, and they were able to pull us a DevOps engineer from a sister company, which is out of the same company, to come in and implement the work. So they had to pull a DevOps engineer from one of their offices in Europe just to come in for 2 weeks to make sure that that blocker was handled. Right. So you realize that was a complex. If you want to tell me complex, that was a complex scenario. How do you answer the question requiring you to mention version of Jenkins, Python, this? This question, we just simply say, what are some of the technology stack that your team use, right? What are some of the tools or technology stack that your team use? So as a Scrum Master, you should be able to understand that when you're working with front-end developers, they are going to use tools like Python, Java, or JavaScript, and then AngularJS, backend Python, Java. Then you're working with DevOps team, you start using Jenkins and GitLab. You're working with data team, they start using Postgres. And then Azure DevOps is a tool. MongoDB, it's a database tool. So you need to master all of these tools. Go on data migration, master about 3 or 4 tools. Go on the front-end developer, master about 3 or 4 tools. Go on back-end developer, master about 3 or 4 tools. Tell me about a time when you had to rally your team around a challenging sprint goal. What strategy did you use to gain their commitment? I would definitely not say we have come across a challenging sprint goal. Why? Because our sprint goal is a result of the work that we've planned. So there's definitely never a sprint goal too challenging for us, because when it becomes challenge, commitment become a big challenge as well. Yeah, but then, yeah, there probably have been some time when the team have to take in a bit more than they can pay. But what I always enable them is to understand that this is just because we are running behind time, and because we've been working as a team that are always open to be flexible around all of this, right? But then, I always help them not to look at this as challenging, but to look at this as being valuable contributor to the organization. But then this is also very possible when this doesn't become a routine. This is something that comes about once in a while, and everyone can understand and jump on board and manage these. As a Scrum Master, how will you add value to the team that's already high performer? We've answered that question already. Just be there for them. You don't have to do anything. Just your presence there in facilitating communication and collaboration is already valuable. And sometimes you might be there, and let's say that they're following up with the IT department for maybe a software update. You can like, okay, you know what? I got that. Just focus on what you're doing. I'll take care of that. Right? You take out some of the duties that are not really directly involved with their work. Help them with that. Why they can focus on their work. How do you ensure that the team follow their agile methodology while maintaining adaptability for changing in project and scope? Simply be there for them, coach them. Right. There's definitely nothing else you need to do by being a good facilitator and ensuring that they are focusing on business delivery and not on processes. What kind of report do you give to executive ROTE? Give example of each of these reports. Simply the output of your team. If executive need the performance report for your team, You simply show them your velocity report or your velocity report and your sprint report. And then for me, retrospective report are like what really add value to my direct manager. But if you get to business executive, I'm more focused on committed versus completed. This is what we committed to so far. This is what we completed. And this committed versus completed always align with you, showing them exactly where you are in the roadmap process. Right. To the ROTE, you definitely are not, you don't submit report to ROTEs. ROTEs already have the program Kanban to monitor what is happening in the team. You can just sit down with them and discuss some impediments that you might need them to communicate to at program level so that your team can move forward. Describe a situation when you motivated or a demotivated team. Okay. There's a recent situation that happened where one of my team was overloaded and they become very demotivated. The reason they were overloaded is because they were pulling in work from two environments. They work on business as usual ticket or they work on ticket on Jira, but they also had management sending in work time to time and pulling them left and right. And because of that, they were really overwhelmed. So what I did is I put up more of a note to management to be able to explain the situation and to sit down with management and agree on an intake process where every work that comes to the team should come through a tailored process. And because I really sorted out this project and management do not have to put them left and right, it was really, really something big for them. And they were once again motivated to pull on with their work with a whole lot of enthusiasm. Why might your team be constantly failing to meet specific deadline, velocity on the server? This has not happened to me, but this is a couple of reasons why a team might fail. The first thing is that the team might not understand how to estimate rightly, so they overcommit, and because of that, they cannot meet up with what they deliver. Now, other situation might also be that they don't understand exactly what estimation is. So they're doing completely something wrong. Right. And then I've also seen a scenario that work is being added to them, scope is being added, and this scope is not accounted for. And because of that, they cannot focus on the work that is on their deck. So these are some of the stuff that help them not meet up their goals. How have you handled a situation where a team member wasn't meeting expectation? All right, so I've had a scenario where a team member wasn't constantly meeting the expectation. I had several meetings with them to find out where they actually needed help and to understand why they were always carrying a spinning over story. But unfortunately, they said they were okay, they did not need help. I suggested that they pair up with someone, but they did not really want to do that. So I had to escalate this issue to my ROTE and my coach, and they also had a couple of meetings with this person, and there was no success. So this issue had to be escalated to management, and after monitoring them for several months, there was no improvement, and management had to let them go because every other one in the team was actually performing, and they were the one holding the team back. All right. Remember that this one, I gave you a clear process on what I try to do. So, and also get other people involved in the entire process. Right. So if you can also do the winning side. So the winning side would be, oh yeah, I had a team member and they were pulling back on work and having a one-on-one with them. I realized they were going through some challenges and maybe they just had they were having some issues with their relationship, but then I had to step in and coach them, help them understand how if they allow this impact the work that they're doing, they might lose everything, and the reason why they should stay strong and how to focus on their work. And by constantly supporting them and talking to them, they recently gained strength and were able to realign with work. If there is a critical production issue mid-sprint and the team is torn between fixing it and delivering plan work, How do you help the team manage crisis without compromising sprint goal? The team cannot divide itself. It's critical. We need to pull effort towards fixing that, and we need to speed over, right? It's about reprioritizing and refocusing. You cannot help them keep both at once. It's either the focus on the sprint goal and meet it and then push over the critical work. But when the critical work always come, I will realize that this is critical and everybody attention need to turn to that, then we must compromise the sprint goal, reprioritize the work and focus on critical issue. How have you helped your company achieve business agility? Simply by supporting my team and making sure that they are performing. Business agility simply means that we are able to deliver digital solution in a fast-paced environment. So by me just playing an effective role as a Scrum Master, I'm able to contribute to overall business agility. Describe an agile experience you have. Describe any agile experience you have working in a software development. Working as a Scrum Master is an agile experience. How do you explain the concept slide? How do you explain the concept slicing user story? All right. So user story slicing simply means that we want to be able to ensure that the story is broken down to the smallest functional unit. Now, when I'm working my team on slicing user story, the first thing I ensure is I make sure that they're having conversation around the story. And we are looking for, is this something that can be further broken down into several components, or is it something that we can do it that way? And then I'm also focusing on, is this something that we add value to the increment that we're delivering? Because if it's not adding value to the increment at the end of the sprint, then we're doing horizontal slicing. So we need to make sure all our slicings are vertical. Vertical simply means that every story that we're building is adding value to the next feature that need to go out. Right, but the whole concept around story slicing, it's about having a conversation with the team and ensuring that we are breaking the work into the smallest functional unit and that everyone have a clear understanding of what needs to be done. How will you manage a product owner who is pushing back on technical debt? All right. I've not been in a situation where a Scrum Master is pushing back on technical debt, but in case I have to be in that situation, now the first thing I'm going to find out why they are pushing back. There need to be a reason on that. And when I find out why they are pushing back, I could then leverage powerful question to redirect them on what could be the possible solution that we can handle. How do you help your team maintain a stable velocity, constantly coach them on the importance of communication and collaboration? Describe one thing you have done to keep your team engaged and energized. Communication, collaboration, within meeting and after meeting. If they can keep this constant, they will be engaged and they will be what? Energized. It's just simply as when we come to mastermind. If there's no room for cross communication and after communication, nobody will be motivated to come back. How will you go about mentoring a new Scrum team? A new team, you do what? You teach them the concept. When they understand the concept, you coach them on how to implement those concepts. When they master it, now you mentor them. So you implement teaching, coaching, and mentoring, while facilitation, feedback cut across the entire process. And this come across via observation. What metrics do you track improve your team performance? Communication, collaboration. You can also look at your you can also look at your burn down chart. Now, the reason why you look at your burn down chart is because you want to see if they're pulling work toward the end of the sprint, right? And you also want to see uh, if they're finishing the work at the middle or so. That helps you to understand if they're actually committing to their true capacity or not. You can also use the velocity chart. How would you approach a team member who speaks their native language in a meeting? Definitely the meeting language is not a native language. So if they speak in a meeting, it might just be for fun or something. So you don't treat that as an offense. Your goal as a facilitator is to be able to refocus everyone. If they are using their native language to give an update in a meeting, then that's not acceptable. But if that is an aside or so, except that is kind of really disturbing to or distracting the meeting. Right. If let's say it's still like a pre-prep meeting and they're having a conversation or so, definitely that's not an issue. It becomes a concern when you start facilitating and then that become a distraction, right? So we encourage culture and diversity and culture. It's quite encouraged, but then it becomes a disturbance if it starts disturbing the work that need to be done. How do you help your team in planning the right amount of work? By ensuring that they are having effective communication, breaking down the story. One of the major stuff that make a team overcommit is because they know. So they put up a story, no one want to talk about it. Oh, it's a 5. Oh, Aaron, you're doing this. What's the story point? Oh, 3. 3. We'll go to the next one. Right. With that, they're not probing enough to understand what might be the gap that they need to fill. So implement effective participation during story slicing. In that way, they will be able to have deep conversation around that and commit to the right amount of work. Can you describe a situation where you had a stand-up for your team? What was the outcome? Stand-up is a daily stand-up. What's the outcome of the team? The team understand themselves, right? Yeah. Oh, the question like, how can you facilitate an effective stand-up meeting? Right. Effective stand-up meeting, ensure that the teams are not just giving status update. I always ensure my stand-up are effective by making sure I effectively document and track previous conversation so that it's not just a repetition and make it boring. And also my ability to follow up on my team member story, ask the right question when necessary. Can you tell me a time when your team had a challenging deadline to meet? I've not been in a situation where my team had a challenging deadline to meet, but let's assume that I'm working on a release that is coming up in a 2 weeks time, right? And most of the work has not been done and need to go out. So I'm gonna pretend that I had a scenario like that, and then I had to use pair programming, where I group my team members to collaboratively work on a story within that period. So, and I realized this was really productive because in their daily stand-ups, like, oh, I was on a call with James up to about 7 p.m. and they really helped me get this out faster. Right. That's like you do like cross-functional skills. That's kind of something that can help them move faster as well. Now, what you can also do during a tight deadline is that you eliminate some you can eliminate key event like daily stand-up. You can let them not come to daily stand-up and focus on the work. We have also been in a case where we had to suspend our retrospective and spring planning. We had to push spring planning 2 days into the spring just to make sure that they complete the work that was on the line. Tell me about a time when things didn't go as planned. Okay, yeah, sometimes we have a lot of spillover. That was not what we planned. But the bigger goal is that we learn from what went wrong and then how we can resolve that. Please explain in detail the difference between vertical and horizontal story slicing. Now, as simple as if we are not doing story mapping, we're not following release planning and doing story mapping, we're doing horizontal slicing. It means that we're just picking any work and completing, and we are not gradually following the process that will help us focus on work that add value to the increment. So horizontal means that we are not following any process. We just like, oh, I need to do this work. I need to complete this. We need to do this. Work is being done to the team, right? But then when we talk about vertical slicing, it means that we focus on a block and complete it. Now think about horizontal and vertical slicing like a piece of cake. If you cut a piece of cake horizontally, what happens? If you cut a piece of cake horizontally, what happens is that you might like, oh, this is a chocolate cake, right? If you say, oh, this is a chocolate cake, what does it mean? You might not understand that it has different layer of vanilla and all of that. So you focus on the horizontal part, right? It's just like another example, we might be building a payment gateway that will require it to take 5 different payment type across 5 different platforms. And then you start and you say, okay, I'm going to build paper intake payment for all the platforms. Then I'll come back and I will do credit card payment for all the platforms. You're doing horizontal. But then vertical means let's focus on one platform, get all the 5 payments done, and then move to the next platform. All right, the next question, what does it mean get credit for completed story? So it means just as I get credit for completed story. If you complete a story, you get a credit for it, right? Every story has a story point. So when you finish the story, you get a credit for that story point. All right, so that was a long one and that was a good one. And thank everyone for putting in your question. We have come to the end of our open house. So I'm gonna make this available as soon as possible, and then let's see if we have some follow-up questions. I'm gonna take about 2 or 3 follow-up questions. If you have a follow-up question you could not type and you want to ask, simply just unmute yourself and put on your hand, put up your hand. I'm gonna unmute you and ask. I'm gonna take not more than 5. So if you have a follow-up question or a question I answered and you feel like you need a follow-up, put up your hand, and then I'm gonna mute you and you can clarify yourself. All right, so it means, oh yes, Joy. They have requested you to unmute yourself. So look at the screen and unmute yourself. Any other person? All right, so thank you very much.